Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Football Experience brought to you by On the Pod. I'm Nev, and I'm here with Caleb. How's it going, man?
Hey, it's going good. Thought we'd change it up. You introduced it this week. I'm really excited, man. This is the best probably 6 weeks of sport. I reckon the lead in of football, obviously, which is what we'll talk about. But it's Masters week, and the NBA playoffs start soon. So really exciting couple of weeks ahead in the sporting calendar. I'm pumped, man.
Yeah, it's interesting how, like in the Northern Hemisphere, this crunch time comes around spring, and like and that sort of spring energy is like coming into everybody. Like you see more people going out, you see more people happy, excited, and then yeah, it just coincides with the sporting calendar as well.
Yeah, and you can feel it over here as well because like you get the Champions League ties now. They'll start being in like a bit of daylight as they go into night. Everyone. Yeah, I think you can just feel the vibes coming off the TV screen. Everyone's a bit happier. It's springtime, and we're just going into that run in now.
Yeah, it's definitely something to look forward to in the next couple of weeks. Now,
Absolutely.
last time we talked about the European Super League and your version of it. Now, it sort of got me thinking because you did reference the NBA a lot, and I guess the European Super League was a concoction of mostly the American owners. That's what a lot of people alluded to during that whole time. So it sort of got me thinking, what aspects of American sport can we actually bring over to try and I guess make not necessarily make football more exciting, but like have more a sort of glamour events. Now, the first thing that came to mind was, why doesn't football have like an all-star weekend or something like that? Now, I know we have a lot of charity games and stuff like that. So what do you think about doing an all-star weekend? Now, my proposal is not to do it during the middle of the season like they do in the NBA, just to avoid injuries and to avoid fixture congestion, but rather to do it at the end of the season. What do you think about the initial thoughts of that?
Well, I think I think it'd be a really interesting thing to do. In the current system as it is, we touched on this last week. The amount of games makes it nearly impossible. So uh, it's hard because there's probably that early January period where you could maybe look at doing it because all the European leagues have their winter break, and then England normally does have a break going into the FA Cup after New Year's. Um, but I think I don't want to say for player welfare, but I just think the sheer amount of games we put on their legs, and I guess in recent times as well, the reluctance of players to want to go on international duty. If you could use that as a marker, then maybe you might get some of the same problems in that reluctance to play in maybe what players see as a meaningless all-star game. But on the other hand as well, at the same time, we touched on it last time, I think a lot of players look at that NBA and American sports style, and they might see it as a good opportunity to obviously meet their peers and being there with their peers all in one place, having a good time and really pushing the game, but also pushing their own maybe images if you're big enough, if you're a superstar brand. So I think it could be fun festivities, but uh, again, like we touched on last time as well, I want, if we're going to have an all-star game, I want to actually see players not breaking their necks to try and win, but I want to see it competitive. I want to see them in an environment where we actually get to see some of the best players playing together in somewhat of a system or something like that that resembles a real competitive game. Because, like I said, the NBA All Star game is fallen off a cliff, really, for probably, well, at least the last 20 years. Since I've watched it for about 10 years, the NBA, I can't watch the All-Star game. It's terrible. I mean, no one's competing. You're not really getting an idea of how these guys would be playing together and how they would play in a team together. So I think that's a big thing for me. If we were to do it, can we put some stakes on it so that it's resembles a competitive game?
Well, see, now if you allow me, I'll go into my thoughts and my suggestions for how it can play out. Now, you said you want to make it competitive, and I don't think you'll ever really get a competitive fixture out of it, like not a fully competitive fixture like you would like a final or like a match day 38. Yeah. Now, if I was to say, let's make it all for charity, and let's say the winning team, the like all like I don't know, like 50% of the proceeds go towards that one charity of the winning team, then maybe that's something to play for, like depending on how much this means to them. And I know, like in recent times, like especially with social media development, like a lot of players are active. They're like advocating for charities and for these sort of movements and stuff like that. So like, why not have each player sort of throughout that weekend like nominate their one desired charity, and then like the team that they're representing, they can then play for that one charity that weekend. So you have sort of like charity versus charity. Now, not to say that the losing team's charity necessarily misses out, but they get less or something like that, or maybe if it's, for instance, like I don't know, like something along those lines. I was gonna say, if the winning team's charity is like Make a Wish, then like a bunch of people that get to meet the players, but then the losing team they don't get to meet the players. Now that's a little bit poor, because like the just because like that team loses doesn't, like, because it's charity, like it feels off in a lot of people's guts.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe making it something like that, like that maybe more proceeds go towards that one charity or something like that, maybe. That's my idea of how to, I guess, make it a little bit more competitive and get the sort of community in and around it, and how to get more spectators to get it. Like, instead of saying like, oh, like it's just an all-star weekend and the money goes towards the players or the stadium that's going to host it. No, like 100% of the money goes towards like chosen charities and stuff, which I think a lot of people would get behind. You'd get a full stadium behind it, and it's something that would, I guess, incentivize not just the players but also the spectators as well. Now, what I would suggest is that you mentioned the January period, that there's like there's some openness around there in terms of fixture congestion. I still think that because there's a lot to play for, like going from January into Feb, March, April, like you have players that can get injured in January and they're out for the season, or they're out for the next 2, 3, 4 months from January. So like, I don't want to add any extra strain on players and add any extra risk around that time. So what I would suggest is have an all-star game at the end of the season. You can either do it for the FA Cup weekend, depending on how people feel strongly about tradition and having that one game for the weekend. So you can have the all-star game like maybe the day before the FA Cup, and you can make it that each club has to provide 2 players to that all-star team. Now that's 20 players, so we're obviously too short for 2 teams, like for 2 teams from each I guess, if you do North versus South. So you can do North versus South, and like, I'm talking Premier League only. So North versus South, each club provides two players. So if you can try and divide it up to 10 clubs, That's 20 players. Now, what you also do is you can also throw in the 2 automatically promoted teams from the championship to provide 2 players each as well. So that brings you up to that would bring you up to, or you get like the first place team. So that would actually bring you up to what 22 players, and then but each club provides 2, so that's 44 players. So you can do it like that, where you either get the first place club in the championship, or even just the top 2 clubs in the championship to provide players as well. So that way you have an equal sort of balance of players. You don't have one team providing like 6 or 7 players. Like you don't have a Liverpool providing like half of the team, or a Man City providing half of the team, and they're risking all of their players. So you can do it sort of like that, and that way you get a representation of players from say Crystal Palace or Burnley or Newcastle playing with have like a Saint Maximin playing with Mohamed Salah, for instance, or something like that. Like you can get those sort of matchups, and then it also provides a look into how potential transfer prospects could play with other players as well, and play with better players as well. So that could be interesting as well. So what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so firstly, to touch on the money going to charity, which I think is a really good idea. I think obviously because this is your showpiece, or I guess you kind of want it to be the showpiece event of your league. You want to have that connect to the community. You want to show that the league is doing good things for fans, for the community. Really, the whole experience would be for the fans, really, at the end of the day. That's what they always say about the NBA All-Star Game. But I will also say that they do that in the NBA All-Star Game, the money to charity at the end of each quarter. And then whoever wins the game at the end gets a bigger percentage of the money going towards their chosen charity. The last quarter gets pretty competitive normally, or somewhat competitive, but the first 3 are just not worth watching. So I think players sort of they live in their little bubbles, it seems. I mean, obviously, I'm not close with any professionals, so I'm speaking from the outside, but it just seems like they live in their bubble. So I don't know how motivated all of them would be to play for that. But absolutely, it's a good idea regardless, because it's doing something good either way. So I just wanted to touch on that. The timing is questionable, obviously. If it's going into the FA Cup the next day, I like the idea that now you've got a weekend to celebrate the game, because the national trophy in each country is the day to sort of celebrate the club game in that country. Obviously, FA Cup final day is a big day for England and the other clubs that play in the English league. Obviously, you got some from Wales as well. So I like that, but obviously it brings its own logistical problems with an FA Cup final the next day. You're not going to expect 2 players from the teams who are competing in that the next day to play in that. End of the season also brings its own problems, because when does football really end? I mean, you finish your club season and then you go straight into international play at least every second season if you're one of the best players. And then even if you're doing that or not doing that, when do you get your break in? Do you really want to be sticking around for an All-Star game, or do you want to go off to the Bahamas and enjoy your holiday? Especially when you've been in the grind for 4 or 5 months in that harsh European winter. I don't know if players will want to stick around for that. So that would bring its own problems, I feel. But like I said, it would be convenient to put it with the National Cup competition, because that would be a really showpiece weekend for the club game in that nation. And then finally, the 2 players in each teams. As I said last pod, I'm a bit of an elitist when it comes to sport. So just for me, straight off the bat, I don't like that idea, because I don't think you're getting the All Stars now, because now we're saying Ivan Toney can have a place in this team, but Diogo Jota can't, Phil Foden can't, or whoever it is. You take those players from the big teams out at the expense of a player from a smaller team who's just. I think everyone understands that they're not as good, and then you raise that interesting point about you could have a look at how potential signings would fit in. So it was interesting because the two players from each club sort of suggest that you would want somewhat, I don't know, a fair representation from every club in the league. But then if you're talking about transfer targets, we're talking about the bigger clubs with the money who will be looking at the best players from these teams. So on one hand, we wanted that fair representation. We wanted the sort of equality for those lower teams. But then on the other hand, we also want to advantage the bigger teams to have a look at their potential transfer targets and use this as a tool that will help them ultimately. So the two for each town. If we're going to do it all star for me, I just want to see the best players. I think in the NBA they do a sort of combination of like the basketball writers and journalists. They nominate all stars, and then the fans have a vote, and then each is given a percentage weightage for. So I don't know. The writers' vote may be 80% of what matters, and then the other 20% is decided by the fan vote. However, it's worked. So I think that could be a way to get selections as well. I think that seems pretty fair. But like I said, I think in terms of that, and I don't know, you might elaborate on why you wanted to go with two for each club. But for me, I just want to see the best players playing in a game, however it's formatted.
Well, the reason why I suggested two from each club is obviously to get a fair representation of the league itself. And I know that there will be 3 clubs going down, so there's 6 players from those 3 teams that are going to be champion. Technically, they're championship level, but it's also as I mentioned in the sort of reasoning as well. Like, it's to avoid a potential injury catastrophe to like the top players from like one club. So like, yeah, if you get like Diogo Jota, Salah, Mane, Henderson, Fabinho, Van Dijk all playing, like I know the risk of injury is there, and I know it's like a very small percentage, especially for a charity game where they may be going 90 or 80% instead of 100%. But like, you're still risking, half your starting 11 to a charity game. So that's the reason why it's like I'm suggesting 2 players from each club, and then also like bring in the top 2 or even top 3 championship teams. So like you mentioned, the 2 clubs that are going to be competing in the FA Cup. So let's say, for instance, this year it's Man City and Chelsea, or Liverpool and Chelsea, just to not annoy you since you're a Liverpool fan. Let's say it's Liverpool. Let's say it's Liverpool and Chelsea. So you're obviously going to be missing out on like a Salah or a Van Dijk. Those are the 2 that come to mind that would be on like 2 of the top names on the team sheet. And then obviously you could, if they're the 2, then you have like Mendy and I don't know, Kante from Chelsea or something like that. So that's 4 players. So like, how about then you do the top 3 clubs from the championship to fix the issue that you're going to be missing out on 4 players, plus you need to get one team to provide another two anyway. So you could do it like that. Get the three teams that are going to be promoted from the championship to provide 6 players to sort of fill that void of the one team missing, to bring it to 22 players, and also the 2 clubs that are going to be playing in the FA Cup, which are most likely going to be Premier League teams anyway. So that's my suggestion there. Now, things that you could also throw into the mix. Now, obviously, like with the NBA, they have like their mini games, so they have their 3-point contest, their dunk contest, and things like that. So things that you could do is you could obviously do like a free kick challenge. You could do a crossbar challenge as well. I haven't really thought of anything that the goalkeepers could get involved in, except having one of those. Those. Have you seen those mechanical shooting robots that like that keepers can sometimes practice against, where they just
Yeah, I think
launch
I
balls?
have.
So like to get sort of a little bit of consistency, use one of those, and then keepers have to sort of challenge against that. But like those sort of fun mini games. And I did actually see, I think when Rooney went to the MLS, I think they had something in one of their preseason games where they had like a crossbar challenge from the halfway line or something like that. I saw that they did, which looked sort of fun. So you could obviously throw those mini games in, and I was also thinking you can to have a third match. So you have like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. To have a third match, you can have a Premier League Legends game, like a veterans game as well. So you have like your Keanes, your Vieiras, your Henrys coming back and things like that, like Gerrard, Lampard coming back to play a Legends game, which they do once a year, something similar once a year. I think Gerrard played Liverpool versus Barcelona
Yeah.
the other day. So you could do something like that as well. So like, and I think a lot of people would come back to watch, even though they're like 50 years old, a lot of them or plus, people would still be interested in something like that as well. So you have like a sort of a more fun, relaxed game with the veterans. Then you have a slightly more competitive game with the All Stars, and then you have your FA Cup on the Sunday. And just to throw something else in, that I really like what the AFL do for Grand Final Day. This is obviously for all the Australian listeners. They have the 100-meter sprint, which I really like. Like for some reason, I've always loved the 100-meter sprint that they do. So like just seeing who the fastest player in the Premier League is for a 100-meter sprint, that would actually be pretty cool to see. I'm not sure what the hopefully they don't pull a hammy or whatever when they're doing that run. But yeah, like that'd be pretty cool as well. Just to throw that in as a mini game, and then obviously the winner of each of those sort of mini games, like whether it's a free kick contest, a penalty shootout contest, or whatever, like around the world contest as well. Like and then you can also have like a freestyle contest as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, like you could do a lot of these things, and then like the winner of those, like 10k or 100k or whatever goes towards like their chosen charity as well. So like just have all these like extra incentives for them as well. So I think to sort of bring it around, I personally think that it would be a really good idea, and obviously there's a lot of logistics to iron out and things like that. And I know you mentioned that you'd rather see the elite of the elite, so like players just from the top 6 clubs or even top 8 clubs representing the All Stars, because that's what All Star is, rather than having 2 players from each club. But again, to sort of minimize risk of injury to half a team starting 11, that's my suggestion or alternative, and to not have not players, managers arcing up about the extra overload towards their players, because the top teams, they're playing 60 games a season, whereas the bottom teams, they're only playing 40 to 45 maybe, depending on how deep they go into the FA Cup and Carabao Cup. So yeah, that's my little suggestion of how to get it all running. And the reason why this all came about, it's not just because you have that ESL, your version of the ESL, but also because the other day, like they had on Talksport, they talked about a London 11 versus a Northwest 11, which sort of got me thinking about how this can actually be done. And like, yeah, maybe instead of having All Star, you can have a London 11 versus Northwest 11. So I did actually create my own 11 as well for that. Don't know if you're interested in hearing that, but I'm gonna say it anyway. But yeah, any thoughts on the whole weekend idea, or the whole idea in terms of like what I added, or no?
First of all, of course, I'm interested in hearing and probably rebutting a few of the selections
Mm-hmm.
into the London versus Northwest 11. Secondly, all of the trimmings and the sideshows for the AllStar Weekend in 100% in. I love the sound of all that. Legends games, fun games, skills challenges, freestyle challenges, crossbar, games of horse, maybe even penalty shootouts, maybe hockey style penalty shootouts. I'm in for that. All of that. I like seeing players in because I think it's always interesting. It's always fun to see players when you get like those clips of training sessions and stuff where it's a bit more lighthearted, but there's still that bit of competitiveness but there's not that pressure, so they can try things. And it's always interesting to see what they can do when the pressure's not 100% on, and how they can, like, some of the great players who could strike a ball fantastically well, see what they can do. Like, you always hear the stories of Paul Scholes at training, seeing someone pissing in the bush and hitting him from 40 yards on the head, 40 yards away on the head. I mean, so to be able to see things like that would be really fun for the trimmings of the All Star game. So 100% in on that.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I was thinking as well, and it's half baked. I've sort of thought about it, but it's just in the middle. It will be all the 100-meter sprint stuff. That would be really fun to watch. I mean, I don't know how much players want to put themselves in harm's way, but you could do a series of. So another fascinating thing I'd love to see is athletes playing different sports. So like footballers playing European handball, basketball, or something like that. That would be really fun to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, second only to that, I'd love to see him do athletic tests or physical tests, like agility tests, sprints, strength tests. And I think just to get a winner out of those sort of things would be really fascinating to see who wins those things in the league, and whether that correlates with their performance on the pitch. That'd be a lot of fun to see as well. So yeah, the trimmings actually borderline get me more excited than the game, to be fair, but 100% in for that stuff.
Yeah, that actually be pretty cool to like what you mentioned, to expand it into sort of like a mini Olympics where you have like them doing track and field.
Yeah.
That actually be pretty cool. Like, um, I'm definitely down for that. But the only the only thing to all of that is clubs and managers saying, what is the risk of injury, like with players
Yeah.
exerting themselves, especially at the end of the season as well.
Yeah.
You know, that's the only, I guess. I think logistically, that's the only concern that that clubs would have. What is the risk of injury? So, and that would be the only objection that they would have, I think. Overall, though, I think that it's definitely an idea that, you know, the Premier League should consider doing, because at the end of the day, it's for a good cause, and there's no other reason not to do it other than for a risk of injury.
So I'm guessing you're about to go into your teams. You don't have anything to add on the format of the weekend or anything like that.
No, like I think just have it like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So like you can have the veterans game on on the Friday night. So that's something light for
Yeah.
people to go and watch after work. And then on the Saturday day, you can have like a lot of these sort of skills challenges and things like that. And then like around 5 or 6 p.m., you can have the All Star game, and then obviously, and then I think if you're just going to do a 100-meter sprint, you could probably do it before the FA Cup final itself,
Yeah.
because that takes, you know, a minute to five. It takes 5 minutes to probably set up.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So before you go into your teams,
Mm-hmm.
because the formatting sounds good. Obviously, in an ideal world, it would work out with the FA Cup being the showpiece event at the end. So I like the sounds of all that. Apart from obviously the reservations I had with the FA Cup being the next day for players who might play in the game.
Mm-hmm.
But just thinking about it now, the question I want to ask you is, would you be more excited to see the players who were selected, like the best of the best? Because I feel like, thinking about it, I would be. Would you be more excited to see these players playing like football tennis against each other, or football golf, or even like any variations of other games that involve football against each other? Because from the outside looking in, I think we'd get a more competitive environment between these really great players in that sort of scenario, rather than a full 11v11 game.
I think it's definitely something to consider. Like the other week, I think Manchester City put out a clip of, I think it was Grealish playing against Bernardo Silva on that football table tennis, and that actually got competitive, especially when the other players started like chiming in off the sidelines and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Because you'd have all the other All Stars watching them doing this as well, so they'd be chiming in, and you'd get that kind of environment around that as well.
Yeah, so you could have like a doubles tournament or something like between the teams as well. So that actually, I think something like that would be pretty interesting. And you said football golf, like I think Gareth Bale's going to be winning that one if he comes back to the Premier League. So, I think something like that. Yeah, that would actually be very enticing for not just the players themselves, but also for the fans to watch. So, yeah, I can definitely get behind that. Like as many fun games and activities as you could fit in. So yeah, I'm definitely down for that. Now, I'm gonna transition into the Northwest versus London 11. So TalkSport, when they did it, they had a couple of conditions and a couple of rules. So firstly, it's pretty much the top 4 clubs from each region. So from London, you will have Arsenal, Tottenham, Chelsea, and West Ham. And I know that after last night's performance, you'll have a lot of Crystal Palace fans advocating for Crystal Palace to be considered. And to be honest,
well, why wouldn't they?
Well, I think it's just to keep 4 teams from each region or each section. But to be honest, I'd love to throw in Conor Gallagher into the mix, but due to these constraints, and I did do this last week, so I'm going off of what the constraints that TalkSport put in. So, and from the Northwest, you obviously have your Liverpool, your Everton. I know the Everton shouldn't really be in there, but there's no other really big club up there besides Everton. Man City and Man United. Now, the constraints that they put in, so that especially for the Northwest, so that you don't get like 5 or 6 players respectively from Man City and Liverpool. So it's not just the Liverpool and Man City combined 11. You have to pick a minimum of 2 players from each club and a maximum of 3. So this will obviously put a little bit of tinkering in terms of you have to sacrifice some positions as well. And just to give you an example, for my Northwest 11, I've sacrificed the goalkeeper position and I went with Pickford. Now, Pickford's decent, but
are you not a fan of Pickford?
Out of the 3 keepers, out of the other 3 keepers, like obviously you'd pick Edison or Alisson, like that's a
or De Gea.
Or De Gea, but I think based on if you depending on how you want to play and all that stuff, I think I'd pick Edison over Alisson just because Edison does seem a little bit more comfortable on his feet with the ball at his feet. So, for instance, you had to sacrifice the goalkeeper position. Pickford. He out of the 4 keepers, he's number 4. Like I don't think there's any arguments there, right? Do you have any complaints about that or any rebuttals?
Of him being the worst of the 4?
Yep.
Mate, I wouldn't have a football podcast if I did. No way. No way. When you've got competition of Alisson, Edison, and De Gea, absolutely no chance. He's 4-4 there.
Yeah, okay. So at least we're in agreement. But like that's just an example. You have to sacrifice a position just because you can't pick more than 3 players, and you have to pick a minimum of 2.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'll go through my 11. So Pickford's the goalie for the Northwest. Alexander-Arnold, right back. Van Dijk, right centre back. Diaz, left centre back. Cancelo, left back. Now, I've gone for Doucouré for holding mid, and obviously that's a slight sacrifice, but also from what I've seen from him, he seems like he could be a decent player. But Everton have just been so poor this season that it's hard to it's hard to sort of like justify any of the positions. But again, I picked Doucouré. I picked De Bruyne and Bruno in front. Salah on the right, Ronaldo through the middle, and I've actually gone for 3 Everton players. I've gone for Richarlison on the left. And the reason why I've gone for Richarlison and not another Man United player is because I went through the Man United team and like watching them this season, like I just can't justify putting anyone else other than Bruno and Ronaldo in the starting 11. Like Pogba's been injured pretty much the entire season. Otherwise, you probably replace him with Doucouré, even though he's not really a holding mid. Sancho's only really come into form recently. Elanga has only shown up. I know he's been introduced to the team like since January, really like he's been he's had his like shining moments, but I still think I'd pick Richarlison over those 2, and yeah, that's why I've actually gone for 3 Everton players, and you might have some disagreements with that, so I'll let you pick apart my starting 11. Oh, but before I let you do that, I've also gone for Klopp as the manager because if this is a one-off game, I think Klopp would have a quicker impact and a better impact on this team because he seems more suited to a one-off game or a sort of cup rather than Guardiola. Guardiola seems, I think he's better to build a team over a longer term and like throughout a season, whereas Klopp, I think he would have a better instant impact on this team and get them playing the way he wants to play. If you get these guys together for a week leading into the game, I think Klopp would have a better impact, and his philosophy would come across to the players a lot easier than Guardiola's philosophy. So I've also gone for Klopp as the manager. So I'll let you pick that all apart.
So first of all, if you played this podcast for anyone at the same time of the year in 2019, they would question what the hell you were talking about with that managerial comment at the end, because for all of that decade, pretty much, Guardiola, when he burst onto the scene, was known as the final winner. He would win the finals that he's in, and Klopp would lose the finals that he's in. So it's interesting to hear how you saying that. It's interesting to hear how potentially that narrative has changed out there, because definitely for a long time before Klopp won that Champions League final, the rap on him was that he always lost the finals that he was in, Dortmund and at Liverpool. So I'd probably disagree as well with the managerial pick, just because if this is a team where you're putting together players, but they're high quality players, maybe barring the Everton players, no, they're still high. They're still high. It's a bit harsh. But if you're putting together a team of high quality players, I'd have Guardiola managing that team every day, because I think he could just give tactical instructions which are superior to Klopp's, because I think, to be fair, not many managers even compete with Guardiola on the tactical level, but Klopp is very inflexible, which is a benefit and a detriment at times when I watch Liverpool. Klopp for me is more the guy who fosters the mentality and builds foundations, and then builds on foundations. and keeps units together, man manages well. He's more the guy for me who excels at that side of management, whereas Guardiola for me is the tactical guy who works with the high level players. So for me, I'd change the manager. How many United players did you have? Did you have two?
Two.
Bruno and Ronaldo?
Yep, Bruno and Ronaldo. I can't justify really
No, but
having anyone
all right.
else.
Here's my problem. Here's my problem straight away. So you can have three maximum, right?
Oh, you can have De Gea, can't you?
Exactly. Why are you
Oh,
putting
yeah.
Pickford in over De Gea? You could just have De Gea.
Yeah, see, this is the problem. Like when I was going through the team, like I was originally, I think I wanted to fit 3 United players in. That's why I went from the back to the front. Yeah, I started with Pickford because I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get 3 United players in. But then when I got to the front, I was like, who else besides Ronaldo are you gonna put in there? Like everyone's poor, and like in the midfield, like Bruno's the only midfielder that you'd really put in there. And then I'm just like, I'm going for Richarlison because like every time I've watched him play, like he seems that he's a goal threat every time. Yeah, damn. All right, so all right. I'm gonna change that. I'm gonna put De Gea in goal. So I'm going with two Everton players. So to any Everton fans, too bad.
Maybe the only other question I'd ask is Alan or Decore in the middle. That one's a toss up for me. I like Decore as well, but I think if you're having a holding role player, maybe Alan would fit the mold a little bit better.
I think,
but I'm not going to pick that apart too much. I think the rest of the team was pretty much as I'd pick as well, with your stipulations on it.
Yeah, I think with Decore, I think he's just more of a physical presence, and whereas Alan isn't, he's more of a technical player. So you'd probably put him as like as a sort of Jorginho type player. And you already have De Bruyne and Bruno in front of him, so you need someone that's a little bit more physical, in my opinion.
On that point, remember at Napoli, Alan and Jorginho played together, and Alan was the terrier, the pit bull in the midfield who would go and press and who would go and harry. A lot of what he showed at Everton, actually, and then obviously you put him as the Jorginho, but that team actually had the Jorginho, so he would do that role, but Alan would have to do the dirty work around Jorginho, kind of like what Conte has to do at the moment.
Yeah, again, that was a toss up for me, but I think Alan has also been injured for. Has he? Been? Yeah, he's been. Yeah, so that's why, like I mentioned that I could have put Pogba in there. Is that midfield 3? But yeah, he's just been.
Fred.
Nah, I'm not really. I don't really rate Fred. Even it's really weird though. Like he comes up with his moments, like where he either sets up a goal or scores. Like,
yeah, he's turning me around in recent weeks. I think he looks all right for Brazil as well. I was surprised to see him play getting a start for Brazil, but he looked all right for them. And I think his recent performances for United have actually been all right. I think he's still a little bit lightweight, but sometimes players, they'll just adapt. I think it took Jorginho over a season to start to adapt, and then he was 3rd in Ballon d'Or voting last year, which is just nuts.
I think was it the Tottenham game where he like set up a goal and like he was just doing all these tricks and flicks. I think it was that game where I was like, is this Fred? Like, I'm pretty sure it was the Tottenham game. I'm just like, I have not seen this from Fred all season. Like, what the hell is going on? So I think it was it. Yeah. So yeah, look, in recent weeks he has shown a little bit more life and a little bit more spirit, but yeah, I still think I'd pick Decore over him, even though again, I know that Everton are having a horrid season.
Yeah, you picked De Gea over him because with the rules you got to finagle it.
Plus that, yeah.
No, but the rest of the team is pretty much as I'd pick. I think Richarlison is the standout attacking player from Everton. I also like Demarai Gray when he plays, but he's in and out of the team. But Richarlison's the standout. And obviously, Calvert-Lewin's been injured all season, so he might have had a shout. But if we're going on form,
but yeah, like I think it's like obviously you could fit like 5 or 6 Liverpool players, and then 5 or 6 Man City players. But again, based on the constraints, you got to.
And I think it would be. I think it'd be interesting if you didn't put the constraints to see what team you'd come up with, actually. because it would just be a Liverpool City team, wouldn't it? I don't know if you get any players from United in there.
Maybe Ronaldo, but in all honesty, I'd probably put Jota over Ronaldo because
Yeah, I agree. Jota scored more goals. He does more for the team because of Ronaldo's stage of career.
Yeah,
and when you've actually scored more goals than Ronaldo, then you're doing more than Ronaldo straight away. So
yeah. I actually don't think any United or Everton players get a sniff in the starting 11 of either of those teams.
And the only one I feel sorry for is De Gea because he's actually been all right this season, but Edison and Alisson are still above him. There's no doubt.
100%. Now, that leads me then into the London 11. Now, I'll just start with the manager. Like, I'm going with Tuchel over the other four managers. Like, so you have Arteta, you have Moyes, and Tuchel, and wait, who's the other one? Conte. Ooh. Yeah, look, I did do this, I think, like a week and a half ago. But I still think I'd go with Tuchel because I think he's done more at Chelsea currently. But Conte would definitely be a good shout. And like I think this was back when I think Tottenham just lost after, I think it was just after the Man United game that I did this or something. So then they were just like winning a game, losing a game, winning a game, losing a game. So that's why I didn't go with Conte because he hasn't really had an instant impact, whereas Tuchel had an instant impact at Chelsea, and he's already won the Champions League with them as well. So I think I'd go with Tuchel for this.
And if you go Conte, you lock yourself up into the 5-3-2.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going with Tuchel for the manager just because he has proven himself over sort of like that year to year and a half period. Now, going from back to front, I'm going to go with Lloris for my goalkeeper. Ramsdale was a really good shout, but I went with other Arsenal players over Ramsdale. Otherwise, if I didn't go for my the other Arsenal players, then Ramsdale would probably be my fourth choice out of all the Arsenal players, just because of the constraints. So I'm going with Lloris over the other goalkeepers. I'm going with Reece James at right back, and I know he's been injured leading up till this weekend, but at the start of the season he was ahead of Trent Alexander-Arnold in the England squad, wasn't he? And people were calling for Reece James as being the best right back.
Yeah, everyone's ahead of Trent in the England squad, to be fair.
Yeah, so I'm going for Reece James on this one because I'm just looking at the other right backs. Like Tomiyasu would have been a good shout if he didn't get injured and if he just kept on playing games, because from what I saw him at the start, it was very good from what I saw of him. Obviously, it was less of an impact as Reece James because Reece James contributed with assists and goals. But in terms of defensive solidity, Tomiyasu is a good shout. Who are the other right backs? The other right backs don't really come to mind. No. So I went with Ben White for the right centre back, and I went for Rudiger as the left centre back, and Creswell for left back. Tierney would have been a good shout there as well, and also is it Chilwell for Chelsea?
Yeah, but he got injured. Obviously.
Yeah, and I think he's I think Creswell would be over him, considering that he's been consistent over the whole season. I know now with my midfield, I'm going with Kante and Rice, and I know that Kante he's been injured as well. A couple of these players have actually had.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I know that it
doesn't matter. He's that good. He's that good. He's one of the best midfielders of my lifetime. So no chance. He'd need to be injured all season to be out of the team.
I know, but considering that I didn't put Pogba, for instance, in the midfield three of the Northwest.
Yeah, but there's levels to it.
I know.
And Kante, as good as Pogba is, Kante's next level. Kante's so good.
Kante actually makes Pogba better for France. So
he makes everyone better. He does the job of two players. And the secret is he doesn't look it, but he's a really good technical player.
Mm-hmm.
He can't quite do everything that De Bruyne does to that level, but he's pretty close to being able to do what De Bruyne does.
Yeah,
He is that good.
And he has an engine, so him and Rice have engines, so they can run for days. Now, in front of them, I put Odegaard, and again, this was before last night's performance. If I did this team today, I'd just replace all of the Arsenal players with Crystal Palace players, to be honest. But leading up to before the international break, leading up into this, Odegaard was showing levels. Like he looked silky on the ball. Like his touch was like magnificent. Like it was, and he was creating up a lot of chances, but he just didn't have the players really finishing them. Like, you know, he was setting up chances for Lacazette, and Lacazette he's not the Leon Lacazette, unfortunately. So Odegaard is my number 10. I'm obviously going to put Son and Kane as well up front. In recent weeks, they have, and even like before recent weeks, they're pretty much first two names on the team sheet, I reckon, in terms of attacking players. And I got Martinelli on the left hand side because, in my opinion, I think he has a higher ceiling than Saka, and I think he has more impact than Saka. So I've gone for Martinelli just based off of that. So I'll let you pick that apart.
I actually agree with you, Martinelli points. I think when I watch him play, he probably does have a higher ceiling, but there's definitely an argument to Saka or Martinelli in this team on season's form, because obviously Martinelli was late to the party, but Saka's pretty much been there all season, and he's been pretty good. Maybe Arsenal's best player. Honestly, I'm pretty happy with the rest of the team. The only thing I'll say is I love Rudiger, and his form this season's been fantastic. And I guess I saw it a little bit for Germany in some of the friendlies, but I want to see him play as one of two centre backs, because I think the back three really helps him. He's a really eccentric centre back. I might touch on this point later with the review of the games that we've watched, but centre backs now, there's very few who want to stay disciplined and stay in their centre back role who play for the best clubs in Europe. They all want to go in and press into the midfield areas or into the wide areas either. They just want to squeeze the ball out at the first opportunity. Very few want to organise around them anymore and actually hold the shape around them and defend the area and not go in and press. So that would be an interesting thing that I would want to see. Can he do it? I think he can. I think he's evolved a lot from his Roma days and coming over to Chelsea, where in his initial Chelsea days, I would have said no way could he be part of one of the two. But he's a really good third centre back in a back three. So I would want to see that a little bit more. But obviously, this is a fantasy thing. So with all those choices, the only other one. Maybe you could, because I think Lloris has been very average this season and for probably a few seasons. And honestly, on form, I don't think he should be the French national team keeper. I think Mike Maignan from AC Milan has been killing it over there, and there's no way Lloris should be above him at the moment. So maybe you could look at doing a thing where you get Fornals up into that left winger spot and you get Ramsdale in goal, because Ramsdale's been so good this season, and Fornals has been really good for West Ham as well. And I don't think you'd lose much with Fornals for Martinelli. Obviously, with Martinelli, you get the upside of the younger player in the future. But if you're looking just from this season, I think Fornals has probably been just as effective as Martinelli. So that's something I'd look at, just because I don't really want Lloris in the team, because I don't think his performances this season and even in recent seasons have deserved to be in this all-star sort of team for the London teams. But apart from that, I don't think I'd change anything in this team.
Yeah, look, it was like, obviously you have Mendy and Ramsdale who would be in front of him. I think I'd pick Lloris over Fabianski. I think
Yeah, see, that was the question, and that it is actually a question for me. I think I'd still go Lloris because at the
Yeah,
end of the day, he is still a World Cup winner. But it's actually a question.
I see. The thing with Lloris is he has a mistake in him. Like
Yeah,
it seems like he has like one or two mistakes in him per season or like per
and he's
tournament.
fragile.
Yeah,
He's not built like a goalkeeper who can command the air, and that's not good in the Premier League, obviously.
yeah. But in terms of shot stopping ability, like I think he's very good, and
Mm.
that's why I picked him as the goalkeeper. Just don't give the ball to his feet. If you do, then just replace Ronaldo with Mandzukic up front and let him close down the race.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's been a couple of moments like that where he's had the ball caught under his feet and stuff, like even in the Premier League, let alone the World Cup final. But yeah, I think out of the four goalkeepers, considering all the restraints, you're picking Lloris, unless you want to sacrifice one of the other positions, like change Rudiger out and put Mendy in. I'm not sure and then maybe you could play three at the back with James, White, and Creswell, and maybe put like an extra midfielder in. You could do something like that, but I've just gone for 4-3-3 on both teams just to sort of keep it simple. But if you want to do more advanced stuff, yeah, maybe you throw Rudiger out and put a midfielder in and put Mendy in. So that's something that could be done. Like, cause you know what would be a really good shout, but the problem is that he's very similar to Kante and Rice, Højbjerg for Tottenham. So if you throw Lloris out, put Mendy in, and go three at the back, but then you have Kante, Rice, and Højbjerg,
Yeah.
and they're
No, it
all
doesn't quite work. You don't
yeah
you don't need another midfielder if you've got Conte and Rice in there. You
yeah
absolutely don't. They'll do the work of 3 to 3.5 players in there.
yeah.
So that's the benefit of that. If you've got two midfielders like that in there, then you can free up positions elsewhere to put extra players.
Well, how about you go pretty much four up front because Kane likes to drop deep into that number 10 role, and then you can actually put Saka into the team. Oh wait, no, you've already got three Arsenal players. But yeah, like you could get a little bit creative, I guess, with the formations, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now the final question: out of both of those, who wins?
Oh, I got the Northwest. The Northwest team looks a bit stronger. You just look at the records of the Northwest. You have Liverpool and City, so you got strong players there. I mean, Son and Kane Kane in particular started to hit some form, so he'd be dangerous. But I think overall, apart from the midfield, which I really like of the London 11 with
Yeah.
Kante and Rice, I think the Northwest team is stronger than the London team.
See, I think the front three for London is stronger. The midfield is stronger, but the defense that Northwest have, to me it just seems insane. The only
Mm.
concern that I'd have, and this is based off of the last performance or the last game that Martinelli had against Alexander Arnold, you might have a problem there. So like with Martinelli against Alexander Arnold. So I actually think this is a lot more even than what a lot of people would say it is. And I I think that the London 11 could actually surprise the Northwest just because the midfield is so strong. I think that's a better midfield. I think they'll work
No,
harder.
definitely.
They will work harder.
Well, it's better in the holding areas. I
Yeah.
mean, De Bruyne and Fernandez though, for me, are both better players than Odegaard at this stage. I mean, Odegaard looks a good player, but I need to see it for more seasons.
Well,
So,
let's
in offensive sense, and
let's
if you want
replace
to, if you
Odegaard with Gallagher. let's
see,
do that.
I don't think you that moves the needle that much. To be fair, because Odegaard's
Yeah.
really good, and so is Gallagher.
Yeah, I know.
They're not next level like well, definitely Kevin De Bruyne or even Bruno Fernandes. To be
Mm,
fair,
yeah.
I think if you wanted to look at it semi-tactically, I think the running from De Bruyne and Fernandes into the channels, where you're asking White on the right centre back to defend and Rudiger, because they're both centre backs who want to step out and close down the space in the midfield. You could leave big holes in there from the running from midfield, and then Ronaldo could just pounce. So it'll be a fun game to watch, no doubt about that.
Well, that's why it'll be a perfect game for maybe instead of having an all-star team, you have this team. So long as I guess one or two of these teams aren't playing in the FA Cup, then you could probably fit something like this in. But you know, with Man City, Liverpool, and Chelsea all in the semis, you're bound to get some of these players in the final. So this would be perfect for an all-star weekend, so long as I guess the players aren't playing in the final. And that's why that's pretty much this culminated in me coming up or having the suggestion with the All-Star Weekend.
Yeah, no, that's fun. I enjoyed that. That was good fun.
And I think having gone through all of that, I think it's perfect to now go into I guess a review of the Premier League weekend, and I guess like the fixtures from around Europe as well. And I know I've touched on it a couple of times when going through the London 11, and last night's game against Crystal Palace. Look, I want to get your thoughts on it, and then I guess I'll have my mini rant, my little dedication to AFTV as the resident Arsenal fan. But yeah, I want to get your thoughts on the Crystal Palace Arsenal game.
I mean, you guys, they had Lee Dixon on the Premier League coverage that you get around the world, and he was saying how the performance lacked enthusiasm, it lacked any sort of desperation, and I guess you could somewhat see that in particularly the first half, but it's a tricky one because it's hard to gauge that when a team has more possession of the ball like you guys did and did in most of this game and in the first half, where you're looking at the desperation in terms of the intensity of ball movement, the intensity of concentration to take the right first touch so that the ball can move in the next touch to its next place. And you see this when top sides, and I'm not sure if we're ready to put Arsenal in that category yet, but when top sides have a bad day, particularly against a team where they have more of the ball, you see it more in that they're playing in 3-4 touches, and that just slows down the ball so much more. So I thought that was probably a big problem for Arsenal. The fullbacks were a massive problem as well in this game for Arsenal. Cedric's not quick enough anymore. So if you want to play Cedric, he has to be protected. He has to almost play as a third centre back, or he needs the protection of Saka in front of him, which he didn't get often enough in the first half. And I thought Zaha had his way with Cedric. Tavares looked like a guy who hadn't played in a while, and that showed. So we touched on it in the first pod, about how I thought you guys needed an upgrade in that centre back next to White, and Gabriel makes the mistake for the second goal. He goes in to try and win that ball, which he has no business trying to do. He's just got to stand off and close off the space, and IU doesn't have an avenue towards goal. So I don't know. It was just a game where Palace took their chances in the first half, and you guys didn't create enough, and then you were chasing it, and I thought you guys were good enough in the second half, but because you're chasing it from 2-0 down, it wasn't going to happen. So fair play to Palace, but you guys really you've just left the door wide open for that top four now.
Look, I think what you mentioned about like the lack of desire and like lack of hunger, I think it's a very like it's true. It's a very I guess summarized way to put it. Like there's obviously a lot of other things that you can put it down to, and like the Arsenal that I saw last night, it was just a shadow of the team that I saw before the international break. And I'm not sure how many players went away with from Crystal Palace that went away with their national teams, but I think Gallagher got called up, Zaha got called up, and I think Mitchell got called up for England. But I don't think they had like half of their squad or like even their entire starting 11 being called up. Whereas Arsenal, they had, I'm pretty sure Ramsdale got caught up, or didn't he? Because he was coming back from injury. But even so, like that's just the goalkeeper. Martinelli went away with Brazil. Saka, he actually had COVID, tested positive for COVID. Lacazette doesn't go away with France. Xhaka goes away with Switzerland. Partey goes away with does he play for Ghana? Yeah. Odegaard, I'm pretty sure he went away with Norway. So like you had the team, you pretty much had the majority of the Arsenal starting 11 going away for international duty, and you could say it showed because they just looked lethargic. Like Crystal Palace just looked like they wanted, like pretty much. I don't know if you remember like training as a junior, like when you'd play like the mini games and you'd say like you need to win the ball back within like 5 seconds or 10 seconds of losing possession. Like it just seemed like Crystal Palace, as soon as they lost the ball, they got into shape and then they tried to win it back immediately, especially in the first half. In the second half, they started to sit off a little bit more, but in the first half, they were just quicker on the ball. They were more physical. They bullied Arsenal as well. Like Arsenal just seemed like they weren't they either weren't interested or they went in too cocky because they were coming off a good win over Aston Villa, and they were I think they got like 4 wins out of 5 in March, and yeah they just did they just looked a shell of the team that you saw before the international break, and like you said, they opened up the door to the top 4, especially with Tottenham looking like they're coming into form and winning. What was it, 5? Was it 5-1 that they won?
Yeah.
So yeah, like it, and then not only that, but to add like more salt in the wound, you had Partey coming off with an injury. Like I think I think it's a hamstring injury. And before the game, Tierney received a knock to his knee or something. And I think I even heard that Tierney's out for the rest of the season. And Partey, if it's a hamstring, that's 4 to 6 weeks. I'm giving it. I'm usually hamstring 6 weeks, but 4 weeks just because it's professional football. They have the expert medical staff and the new recovery systems and stuff on hand. So maybe 4 weeks, but 4 to 6 weeks there. But missing Tierney is massive. That left side just looked so weak, fragile, and suspect. I think it's actually Tierney that makes Gabriel play better. And he's the one getting into Gabriel's ear. And like you said, Gabriel had no business stepping out and trying to intercept that ball, especially trying to like 2-foot tackle it. Like he was diving at the ball. Like you're that far away that you need to jump and dive for the ball. You have no business doing that. But I will also say Tavares' positioning for that second goal was suspect as well. Like he was slow. He was very slow and let Ayew get away from him as well. Like the distance between him and Ayew, it was like a good 3 or 4 meters. And Ayew's coming off that wing as well. So as much as Gabriel is to blame for that, some blame does have to go on Tavares as well. And Tavares, Tavares, ever since that first Liverpool loss, you haven't seen much of him, but what you have seen of him since then, he's looked like someone that just doesn't have any clue, any confidence. Yeah, he looks like a shadow of the player that you saw in the first couple of weeks at the start of the season, where you're like, he's one of our best players, and like I'm not sure whether that's saying that he came in full of confidence or just because Arsenal were very poor at the beginning of the season. Even in the couple of wins that they picked up, he was one of the better players. But yeah, like an extremely disappointing result based off of the performance, not necessarily based off of um, like the actual result itself, but more based off of the performance, especially of the first half. The second half was better, but it just showed that we're lacking those players that can finish. So Martinelli, Smith Rowe, Saka, Odegaard, I think they all had a couple of chances, especially Smith Rowe. Like he had one in the 6 yard box that he should have finished, and he just like passed it to the keeper. And I think with time, as they get a little bit older, they will learn how to finish. Similar to Salah, like he's learned how to finish. Um, so hopefully these players develop and they learn how to finish, especially in those like gilt edged chances. Um, and Ketia looked very good when he came on, and that's saying a lot. Like considering the rest of the team, like considering like when Nketiah has come on, he's looked poor and just like Bambi on ice pretty much. But
Yeah.
in this game, he looked our best player when he came on, to be honest. And he I think he set up like a chance I think for Odegaard that Odegaard put wide. And I think he had that shot that hit the it was like the pretty much the top corner. It hit up the crossbar. And I think he even set up like another chance as well. He was involved in the play with like the 1-2 with I think it was with Lacazette and Martinelli, and that so yeah, overall extremely disappointing, and hopefully it's going to be a reality check for them going into the next couple of weeks that they need to work harder. But yeah, losing two players as well. I think that's definitely hurt the chances, and I don't think they're favourites for the top four anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point about the injuries. That's huge. I think you can maybe just about get by without Tierney, even though obviously it's a downgrade, but without Partey in the middle, you guys are weak in that midfield. And Partey is a huge loss. And if that's hamstring 4 to 6 weeks, oh, that's as good as the rest of the season. You'll be coming back in with only a couple games left to play. That's massive. That is huge. I just don't think the night could have gone any worse for Arsenal, to be
Yep.
fair. I mean, if you just lose the game, all right, it's the Premier League. Sometimes it happens. They took their chances in the first half. They're 2-0 up. We got to chase the game. 3-0 we lost, but we try to chase the game. Whatever. It happens in the Premier League. But losing maybe Tierney for the rest of the season and Partey for maybe 4 weeks, that's a killer blow. Absolutely killer blow. But you've also got to mention fair play to Palace because
100%.
I've actually thought all season that Vieira's gotten a free ride. I don't think, and look, I preface all of this by saying I think he's done a good job, but I don't think he's done a great job. What the all the pundits are describing, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he was an absolute colossus in his time playing, and people still remember that and love him for that. So I think that's it. That doesn't quite sit right for me because if you look at the stats going in last season, Palace finished on 44 points or 45 points or something like that. This season they were on 34, I think, going into this game. Obviously, with time left to eclipse what they did last season, but I mean, it's not a vast improvement. The style of play, I think, is a bit overstated as well. While they probably have pushed up 10 to 15 yards further up the park, and they do keep the ball a little bit more. It's still a 4-4-2. It's still organised. Still has very much the Hodgson trademarks on it. So I just think while Vieira, I think, has done a good job, and I think ultimately it's good that he's getting all this praise in the media because if they can turn in performances like this morning on the regular, I just think it was a little overstated the job that he's doing at Palace. But like I say, I still think he's doing a good job. And I think that probably leads me into another overrated guy for what he not for something that it doesn't involve playing football or managing football, and that brings me to Marcus Rashford. Because I look at the United game, that 1-1 draw with Leicester, and you see the team selection, and you see that they don't go with a striker and Rashford's on the bench. I mean, what's going on? That's got to be a killer blow to your confidence to see that he'd rather start Fernandes and Pogba as your two strikers rather than even try and find a way to get Rashford in the team. Rashford is also the 15th highest paid player in the league. And if you look at the stats for highest paid players, I mean, United, I think, have the monopoly on him. But Rashford's up at 200 plus a year, which puts him level with Mo Salah. I mean, it puts him. I'll tell you who else it puts him. It puts him above Trent. Puts him level with Harry Kane. Level with Thomas Partey, who's very important for that Arsenal team. I mean, I just think he's probably the most overpaid player, maybe in the world. And ultimately, I think it's great that he gets to be overpaid because he wants to make a difference in the community for the better. So if anyone's going to get that money, it's probably good that it's him. But for what he does on the football pitch, there is no way in hell he should be earning £200,000 a week. Absolutely no way for what he does on the football pitch and for what he's done on the football pitch, which is he has no real career achievements to date. Why was it ever a good idea to pay that guy £200,000 a week for accomplishing nothing? And that just goes into the problem that I think United have. I mean, because I'm using all of this from Sport Track, but they have the highest paid player in the league in Ronaldo at over 500,000. De Gea is most paid. Sancho fourth at 350,000. Varane fifth. And then Paul Pogba is ninth, equal ninth. And Edinson Cavani is equal 12th. And then you get down to Rashford. And then you got Harry Maguire at 22nd. Bruno Fernandes, Juan Mata is still picking up £160,000 a week. I mean, they're United for years. They've just tried to throw money at this problem, and they have no real clear plan. And obviously, you get to hear Roy Keane and Gary Neville talk about it after every United game, seemingly this season. And it was disappointing to listen to the Sky Sports post-match stuff because you didn't have Roy Keane on this week. It's always entertaining when you get that after a United game where they haven't played particularly well. And they didn't play well. They were outplayed by Leicester for most of the game.
Mm-hmm.
But it's madness that they're paying these. See, I can understand obviously with Ronaldo. I can understand with Varane. He's accomplished things in the game, but for Rashford to be making that money, I think is ludicrous and is a real indicator of where United have one of the places they've gone wrong in recent seasons. But having said that, Arsenal losing means they're not quite out of this top four race yet. So
I think with the whole United thing, you know what the first thing that comes to mind is? Barcelona before Laporte came back as president, where Barcelona were just throwing money at players, and then players would come in and they just wouldn't perform, but they'd still be picking up, 200,000-300,000 euros a week. And you mentioned like a lot of those players, and yeah, like Rashford's picking up 200,000. He's not even like this is the second time that Rangnick's gone without a striker. I think the first time was against Man City, and you have Juan Mata who barely ever features, picking up 100. You said 160. That's insane. Like,
yeah,
and then so it just reminds me a lot of Barca when they've gone through this slump over the past 2, 3, 4 years, and only now, once a new president has come in and changed the direction of the ship, are they starting to see some results. Obviously, having like bringing Xavi in as a manager looks to be the right appointment as well. Like, and United don't have the right manager. They haven't had the right manager since. I'm going to say Mourinho, because Mourinho at least won. I think, did he win an FA Cup and also Europa League?
Believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so like
he might have even won a League Cup in there as well.
Yeah, and I see these quotes circulating where I think Mourinho said like Rashford's lazy. Well, like, there's like 3 or 4 players that he called out that like what just aren't good enough, and like all three or four players are now like really poor or not playing for United. I know Rashford was definitely one of them. I can't remember the other ones though. But yeah, like that started circulating over the past couple of weeks that I've seen over social media. So like Mourinho identified, I guess, like problems or cancers in terms of players that they needed to get rid of, but instead they just offered them new contracts. And I think Bruno has been, I guess, one of the shining lights for them. Out of all the players, he's been probably their best player over the past 2 seasons. And I think he's actually gotten a new contract this week or at the end of last week. So he's gonna be even higher paid now after that. So he's gonna move up on that list that you mentioned. But yeah, I think it's definitely coming from top down. Like it's definitely their problems are at boardroom level. It's not just as simple as saying the players aren't good enough. It's the boardroom that are making these decisions to put in place these sporting directors or technical directors and also these managers who aren't at the level. They're not putting in the right managers to manage the club. So it's 100% on the board that's at fault for these things.
And I don't know if you listen to the Sky Sports the coverage, the post-match or the pre-match, especially when Gary Neville's on. And the big thing around the time where Solskjaer got sacked and Ranić came in was obviously talk of who the new manager would be.
Mm-hmm.
And every time Antonio Conte's name came up, and I'm guessing he has this on inside information as well, Neville would always say no, he didn't want Conte in as the manager. And he said that's not the type of manager that Manchester United should have. And every time I heard it, I disbelieve. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Because at the end of the day, when you're a big club like this and you're struggling, you get the best manager that you can get in to manage the club, basically. Not just the group of players, but the club. Because you look at the effect that Klopp had on Liverpool. And he came in and he managed the whole club, almost the whole city, who was the red half anyway, because he would be the voice for them. He would say the things that needed to be said. He was obviously a charismatic manager. So he got everyone behind him and the club, more importantly, and the team as soon as he came in. And obviously, I think managers have different ways of doing it. So Conte, in his English, isn't as charismatic as Klopp, but his football speaks for itself. It's always organised. You know what you're going to get from a Conte team. You know it's going to be pretty good because he's a top manager. And you know, most importantly, those players that you're spending so much money on are going to respect him because he's won things in the game as a manager. He's won the Premier League title and one of the better teams to ever win the Premier League title with that Chelsea team. So he comes in and commands that respect straight away. Whereas you get a Ralph Ranić in as an interim as well. Why are we wasting times with interims? But you get him in and he hadn't worked as a manager for a while before he came into United. So I know they're waiting for Pochettino, but at the end of the day, Pochettino, by the same token, he hasn't won really anything in the game. Now he's won a French league title, or he's about to. So, I mean, what's your direction now? Are you still gonna pay players over $500,000 a week to play for Pochettino? Because he's just come from that at PSG, and it didn't work out. Yeah, they're going to win the French league title, but That's not what PSG hired him to do. They hired him to win the Champions League with pretty much the same sort of philosophy as United have been employing of recent times. No real direction up the top, and let's just throw money at players and see what happens. So if you're going to throw money at what's supposedly the best players, who you think the best players are, put them with the best manager. It's not that hard. What are we doing messing around with the Raniks of the world? Antonio Conte is available. Go and get him. It's that easy. If you want to be the best club in the world, like for me, it is that easy. Put the best footballing people in the positions that they need to be in. That's players and that's manager. Because at the end of the day, that product on the pitch is what the identity of the club is. You can say that you want to do everything right outside of the ground, and that's all well and great. But what you put on the pitch each week is the display of where the club is at. And I think that's illustrated by United, because what they put on the pitch was second rate to Leicester at home. So I just couldn't believe it when I was hearing all that stuff. And I guess I also want to link it to the Liverpool situation as well with Mo Salah at the moment, because we were reading all those wages, and I think Van Dijk's the highest paid Liverpool player at the moment at 220,000, and I think he's 12th in the league. So obviously we have the Mo Salah contract dispute. I think he wants 300,000. I think in the market he's worth 300,000. He'd definitely get 300,000 somewhere. But I think Liverpool are scared to ruin. Obviously, the owners don't want to spend money because they want to make money at the end of the day, and that's what the bottom line is. But there's also a message and an ethos that they want to send, which is no one's bigger than the club. And I think Klopp's really behind that. Obviously, everywhere he's gone in terms of Dortmund, Mainz, Dortmund, now Liverpool. His ethos has been we work for the fans, we work for the city, we work for the club. No one's bigger than the club, and he'll never want to really manage players who think they're bigger than the club. So, and you look at that, and you've mentioned what 4 or 5 United players before you get to the highest paid Liverpool player. I mean, that just shows you the different realms that these two clubs are operating in. Albeit Liverpool are spending so much less on weekly wages than United, which is. I guess it really shows that United are broken everywhere. They can't do right on the pitch. They can't do right off the pitch. So I don't know where it changes for them, but I just think that's an interesting contrast between them and Liverpool in terms of now Liverpool are so cautious to break the bank for Mo Salah because they don't want to send the message that now other players can start looking at getting 350 and 400,000 a week. We're not a club that operates like that. We operate that everyone is like, obviously there's better players in the squad than others, but everyone has to pull their weight and play for the club. No one's bigger than it.
I think you definitely have a point there. Like, and I think I remember a quote from Fergie saying, "No player should ever be paid more than the manager at the club." And like once you start getting into that territory, the club starts to break down. And I'm sure like Ronaldo 100% is getting paid more than Ranić, and maybe 2 or 3 of the other players as well are getting paid more than Ranić, especially because Ranić's an interim as well. And if you look at it as like a I guess like a corporation or like a company, like let's just say you work at the supermarket as like a on the checkout or like stacking shelves. Let's say in theory, like as a comparison, that's the footballers. In what right mind do you, doing your basic everyday job, have any right to be paid more than the manager? I guess like some people will argue, oh yeah, you know those workers do have a right, but we're not going to get into that stuff. But like in no company ever are those entry level workers getting paid more than a manager. And in football clubs, you're getting the opposite in a lot of them. And I guess as you mentioned, like with Liverpool, like if you start paying players, like every time a player's contract is starting to come to the end or come into that final year or 2 years, and they start saying, oh, okay, one year that he goes, you have one player say, I want 300, and then another player the following year goes, oh, he's getting paid 300, or I want 310, and it's just going to keep on going higher and higher and higher. And we've seen, and I'll tie this also back with Arsenal, like we've seen two players in recent memory, with Ozil and Aubameyang. Once they got their 350,000 pounds a week, their performance dropped. Like, I don't know what it was, but pretty much instantly they were a shadow of themselves. So does that happen then to other players as well? Like, what happens if Salah's already 30? I think he's going to be 31 next year. What happens if you give him 300 or 350,000, and naturally, just physically, his ability just seems to drop off because he loses that half a second, that half a split second or split second of pace or turn, or like what happens once he starts to lose that physical ability that he has? Like, and you've just given him like, you know, $350,000 a week for the next 3 or 4 years, when he's actually towards the downward trajectory of his career. But also, I want to mention with you mentioned with Gary Neville, like coming out against Conte. I think he's stuck in the past with what United used to do and what they were with Sir Alex. Like he's thinking, oh, United need to go for that manager that's going to be there for the next 15, 20 years. And he probably viewed Conte as like a mercenary type manager, because like he was at Juve for what, 3 or 4 years. He was at Chelsea for 2 or 3 years. He was at Inter for 2 years, I think. You know, he was the Italy manager for I think a year or 2 years. So like he probably sees him as that sort of Mourinho type mercenary manager, where he's at a club for 2 or 3 years and like, yeah, he comes in and gets the results, but once he leaves, everything just falls apart. And that's why Gary Neville, I think, came out against Conte. But in all honesty, that's probably what he needs. And like I don't think that Conte's representation of his time at Chelsea is necessarily the type of manager that he is. I'm sure he would have stayed there for longer if that was in Chelsea's DNA, but Chelsea always seem to get rid of a manager after 2 or 3 years, or even shorter.
Yeah, definitely, and that's a good point you bring up about why he would have had reservations about it. But I think if that's your mentality, you probably just stick with Solskjaer at the point. I mean, it became untenable, and I don't think they could have. But if you want to stick with anyone, I think Ole's your man, because
He knows the club.
he looked like, well, he was the type of guy, I think, that players, you could play for him because he seemed like a good person. I mean, but I don't think he was the top sort of knowledge on how to be a manager, and that's obvious because he came in with an unproven track record. And then because he did well for half a season, they gave him the job full time, which I thought at the time was a mistake. I think there was talk of Allegri at the time and managers like that, and I just think they would have been a better option because big club, big players needs a big manager. But if you are going to stick with anyone, I don't see why you wouldn't just stick with Solskjaer and ride out those tough periods, because football has a funny way of evening itself out at the end of the day. But yeah, no, I think that is why he did have those reservations. And if I'm going to tie it back to the race for the top four, because I guess this is why we were talking about United in the first place. So you say you don't believe Arsenal are favourites anymore. I'm guessing you think Tottenham are the favourites now for the fourth place.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think Tottenham's like jumped ahead of them, especially with the 2 injuries that Arsenal's had. I think Arsenal, they're going to just miss out. I think they're going to finish 5th. But it seems like just because of those injuries, those are 2 massive, massive, massive losses. And yeah, like that's the reason why I have my reservations now.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that, and I think I agree with that because things at Tottenham seem to have settled down. I mean, it's been, I think, over a month since Conte had his last outburst after the Burnley loss, which is obviously, you don't want a manager you've just signed having outbursts about the playing group and how bad they are while he tries to distance himself. I thought he handled that really badly. I don't think that was right. Because if you're a manager of a club, you've got to take a portion and usually the lion's share of the blame. To try and distance yourself from blame for a loss like that is wrong in my eyes. You've got to take it on the chin. You can call out players, but you've got to take your portion of the blame. And it seemed like he tried to get away from that blame, which I thought, just not the best way to handle it. But things seem to have settled down, and also, and it's no great surprise, but the form of Harry Kane is he's finally playing like Harry Kane again. I mean, he's been absent most of the season, but probably the last month he's really ramping it up. So if he can finish strong this season, keep playing the way he's playing, Son has been consistent this season as well, and always those two. It's well renowned the partnership that they have linking up for so many goals, the most in Premier League history, I believe. So I think, and obviously the point that you touched on, the injuries that we've talked about. I mean, Partey's a huge loss. So if it is serious injury for him, I think you're right to put Tottenham as the favourites, even though Arsenal have that game in hand.
But it's against Chelsea.
But it's against Chelsea, exactly. So, and we've been through Arsenal's record against the top three. So I agree with you. I think, but I don't want to make wide sweeping statements on the top four because it just seems to change every week. These teams are like I think we touched on it before. I think it's that might have been the 2018 or 2019 season where it was Emery, Sarri, Pochettino at Tottenham, and they were all just stumbling over trying to get to that top four. It looked like none of them wanted the top four. So we could have another race like that on this occasion. But speaking of Chelsea, I mean, 4-1 at home to Brentford. And it pretty much, for me, definitely knocks them out of the title race if there was any lingering ambitions of a Man City or Liverpool slip, which, let's be honest, there really wasn't. But now it's almost a certainty. But I guess, what kind of implications do you think this could have going into the juiciest of the Champions League ties against Real Madrid in the midweek?
You know how last time we spoke about Chelsea being the favourites, it just makes it more even now. Like, especially coming off of that loss. But the thing is, because they lost now over the weekend, you would expect a bounce. And what perfect opponent to play against than Mr. Champions League themselves, Real Madrid, and to show that it was just a one-off game, it was a blip, and come out and win 2-3-0 and put in a really good performance. So it's going to be interesting to see whether they bounce back, whether this is actually a result that ends up bleeding out and it goes from one result into the next to the next, or whether it's just instant comeback. So it's going to be an interesting tie tomorrow.
Yeah, definitely adds that bit of spice now to see Chelsea's bounce back, to see if that was just a blip or if everything surrounding the club has maybe started catching up with them. My early inclination was it's probably just a blip. Sometimes you get those types of games where the opposition counterattacks on you 3-4 times and they score from each attempt. So without watching the whole game, but watching the highlights, it seems like that was the way that game sort of went. So that does add that little bit of layer to the next game against Real Madrid in the Champions League. I don't know. Do you have anything else from the Premier League you wanted to touch on? I didn't really want to talk about the top two because we'll probably have a pod on later in the week where we do a lot of previewing to that pivotal clash, City versus Liverpool at the Etihad. So I didn't really want to talk about them. They got their routine wins against the teams that they should have. Liverpool aren't playing well. We've talked about that, but they got a win again, a clean sheet. City played pretty well against Burnley, especially first half, to go 2-0 up. So pretty routine. I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to touch on in the Premier League.
No, like it seemed like, Liverpool and Man City went about their business. They got their routine wins. So the derby is this weekend, isn't it? So coming into the derby, they're pretty much equal on points. The Brentford Chelsea game was definitely a surprise. Every other game seemed. Man City Leicester was always going to be close, and I was expecting Leicester to possibly win that, and they could have if not for that VAR intervention. West Ham Everton, that was expected result. Tottenham Newcastle, you expected Tottenham to win, probably not a thrashing though, maybe like a 2-0 or 3-0. Arsenal Crystal Palace, that was a surprise, but not a massive surprise because Crystal Palace over the last couple of seasons, they seem to always give Arsenal trouble. They seem to be that little bit of a bogey team for them. So it's not necessarily a massive shock or surprise, but it definitely it's a little bit of a surprising result, but not a massive surprise. And it just makes the top four race even more interesting because Arsenal, Tottenham are now on equal footing. It's just goal difference that separates them. But other than that, when I'm looking at the other results, everything pretty much went as you'd expect it to go.
Yeah, it definitely makes that top four race a little bit more interesting. So before we do a little recap of the games across Europe, I wanted to ask you before we go into that, give me your top 8 teams in Europe at the moment.
Top 8.
Or I can give you mine first if you want, and then give you some time to think about it.
All right, hang on, let me actually write your ones down just so that I have them in front of me. All right, go ahead. I want to hear yours,
Okay,
and
so
I'll have my input. Wait, just before you go, are
in
you going in order from 1 to 8, or are you just going to go 8, or are you going in order?
I'll go in somewhat in order, but I'm not naming a number one.
Okay.
So I put City and Liverpool probably vying for that number one spot. Now, after what happened on the weekend, I do have to bump Chelsea down to 4th behind Bayern because also Bayern got Goretzka back, and that's massive for them. And the centre back Nine Zhu, who's come in. I think he came in from the academy. He's looked really quite good for a player who's come in. I don't know if he's Champions League winning good, but he's looked pretty solid at the back. So I watched the mini match of Bayern at, I believe they were at Freiburg, 4-1 win. So I put Bayern just above Chelsea now after what happened on the weekend. Then I'd have PSG still in at 5th because I know they got knocked out of the Champions League, but that starting 11 still has so much quality in it when it's right. They just have a mental block when it comes to winning the biggest thing, and they don't have a strong enough culture to win the Champions League yet. But I still got them in at 5th, 5th or 6th, depending on how you view Real Madrid, who are either 5th or 6th. Real Madrid, unconvincing at Celta Vigo on the weekend. 3 penalties they got in the match. The last one, which proved to be the winner in that 2-1 win, absolutely not a penalty. I don't know what VAR is doing. Why aren't we having a look at that and saying that's not a penalty? I'm sick of these touch foul, not even fouls, just touches in the box given as penalties. It's ridiculous. But then I think 6-7 is where you can start to have a debate. For me, the top 6 I don't think can really be argued. The order can be argued, but I don't think who's in the top 6 can be argued. But 7 and 8, I think now you have a discussion about who you put as your 7th and 8th best teams in Europe. For me, I'd put Barcelona in at 7 because I'm fascinated and intrigued by what Xavi's doing there. And I think that's an interesting project, and it's a project that's hit the ground running, so that's fun to watch at the moment. with them getting their 1-0 win against Sevilla, going second in La Liga. Pedri, wonder goal, wonder kid. So they keep rolling. I mean, in 8th spot, you could actually put Sevilla. Really deep squad. They actually have a really deep squad this season. Really tight defense. That was, I think, their 20th goal conceded in La Liga against Barca on the weekend. You could also put Atletico. They're into the last 8 of the Champions League. They're now up to 4th, I think, but they're level on points with Sevilla in La Liga. And I think they've won 5 straight, maybe more. You could put them 8th. Dortmund, no chance. I would not put them in the top 8, and I watched them against Leipzig. Fantastic scenes at the Westfalenstadion. They had full house for the first time in, the commentator was saying, over 700 days. And anyone who's watched the game with Borussia Dortmund at home knows what a full house at that stadium means. It's spine-tingling. It's amazing. And then their team promptly went and just laid an egg for them out on the pitch. They were terrible against Leipzig. I mean, first 15 minutes they came out, looked to dominate possession, but they looked like a desperate team from the start. They played 3 at the back, and that's all they had. Guerrero was making underlapping runs and going and joining in with the forwards as the left wing back, and then as the right wing back, they played Torgan Hazard, whose balance is always going to push him forward. He's not going to do the traditional defensive work of the wing back. They pushed so many men forward from the start of the game, and they asked Hummels, Akanji, and Emre Can to defend so much space, with Witzel being the only protection they had in front of them. And Leipzig, who I think have a couple of good players up front, but who aren't a very good team, and they rolled them 4-1, killed them. So Dortmund, no chance. Leipzig, I wouldn't put anywhere near the top 8 because, as I said, I thought they were pretty average, but Dortmund were just that much worse in terms of their thinking and their play, really. And that's what they've been this season. We touched on that going into the weekend, that we had very little confidence in Dortmund catching Bayern. So I think that would effectively extinguish any title hopes they had. And then you go to Italy, and here's the thing, and here's probably the main reason why I asked this question, is because I don't think you'd have an Italian team in the top 8. Juve are 4th. They lost to Inter at the weekend. I mean, it's another one of those crappy penalties that I hate seeing. VAR checked it, decided there was enough to overturn because the penalty wasn't given. Then there was a farce about the penalty being taken. If you get a chance to watch that because it's just a ridiculous sequence of events. But they lost at home to Inter. Inter played all right against Liverpool in the 2 legs, but they're not top of Serie A. They're not running away with it, so it's hard to put them in your top 8, especially after losing Lukaku and replacing him with Xhaka. I like Xhaka, but he's not the player that Lukaku was last season, so they got considerably weaker in that area. AC Milan, I think they've benefited from the fact that they haven't had European football. I mean, Napoli went into the playoff rounds of the Europa League, and then obviously got knocked out by Barcelona, and Juve went into the round of 16 in the Champions League, and Inter obviously did the same. So AC have been out since the group stage, didn't even make it into the Europa League. So that's a big ding against them if you want to put them in the top 8. But they are still top, even though they only drew this morning. So Napoli's another one who started the season like a house on fire, and absolutely, if they had still had the same form as they had at the start of the season, they'd be in the top 8 for me. But they've fallen off. They were unconvincing against Atalanta, hit them on the counter-attack. Atalanta, we know, love to press. They're never going to change what they do. But I thought, while Napoli weren't fortunate to get out of that with a win, they did. The first goal was crucial in that game, and they got another dodgy penalty where it was one of them where the goalkeeper came out, slid in, sort of stopped himself, didn't outstretch anything, and then Mertens just got to the ball first. And the reason I hate this penalty is because he got to the ball first, he flicked it anywhere. He just flicked it out of play. The ball was going miles out of play, and then he decided to tumble over the goalkeeper's challenge, even though the goalkeeper didn't extend anything. Tiny bit of contact, and they gave a penalty. When the ball's not under the attacking player's control, for me, that's not a penalty. The contact that comes after that is incidental. If he's just knocked the ball out of play, whatever contact comes after that is just incidental. The ball has to be under his control for a foul to have occurred, for me. Because otherwise, it's just such a soft penalty. I hate those ones. But anyway, that's my rant about that type of penalty over. So, look, no Italian team. I mean, and then you've got. I probably would have put Arsenal as 8th before the result this morning. But you could argue for Arsenal or Tottenham. So the 8th, the 7th, depending on how you feel about Barcelona, but definitely the 8th place is up for grabs for me. But that top 6 is non-negotiable about the best sides in Europe for me.
So, like looking around the leagues, I'm just unsure because like you've pretty much mentioned there's 6 that are non-negotiable, which is City, Liverpool, Bayern, Chelsea, PSG, Real Madrid, and I think I'll agree with you there on that. Like I don't think I have any complaints with that, and like out of those 6, 5 are right now in the quarters of the Champions League, so there's absolutely no arguments there. PSG, like you said, the culture of the club, I don't think it's necessarily like a winning culture. It's more of a because they win the French league pretty much every season. It feels like it's more of a culture of entitlement. Like they're entitled to win the French league every year, and because of that's why they're probably faltering in the Champions League, because the Champions League isn't something that they're entitled to. And a lot of other clubs, for instance, they might feel like they're entitled to it. Like Madrid might feel they're entitled to it. Liverpool might feel they're entitled to winning the Champions League, considering they have such a rich history of it, and a much richer history than PSG, Bayern as well. So it's like you touched on. It's their culture that's probably holding them back in the Champions League. But yeah, those 6. I don't think I have any complaints about that. Barcelona, I think over the last since Xavi's come in, yeah, they've definitely turned the ship around. And looking at all of the other leagues and the other teams that are there, I think Barcelona would definitely like win against a lot of those teams that are left that are vying for that 7th and 8th spot. And look, just like 2-3 weeks ago, they absolutely smashed Real Madrid as well, who are in that top 6 in Europe, and like they gave them an absolute hiding.
They smashed Real Madrid, and then in the Europa League they smashed Napoli away at Napoli as well, and that's another contender for that 7 and 8 spots. So.
Exactly, and I think just based on like, and then that pretty much just leaves one spot open, and yeah, for that one spot, like I'm just not necessarily convinced by the Italian sides. But then like if you go based on the Champions League quarterfinals, like Atletico's that fills that last spot, and they're actually above Sevilla now after this weekend. I think that's based on goal difference, so they're actually 3rd in the league.
Yeah.
Actually, no, the goal difference is exactly even, but they've scored more goals for. It's just that they've conceded more as well. So I think Atletico probably would fill that 8th spot. Hey, are you there?
Yeah, sorry, you just cut out.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Alright, I'm going to edit that bit out. So I just finished with Atletico will fill that 8th spot, so you can respond now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think all in all, I'd agree that probably Atletico are in that 8th spot, mainly by virtue, 2 things: their form to push back up into that top 3 in La Liga, over Sevilla. Sevilla aren't in European competition anymore, and Atletico are. Atletico are in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. So yeah, I think, but I think the main thing is that top six is set, and then I think Barcelona's set as well because I think on form they've been fantastic, and they're still heavy favourites to win the Europa League, which is a fascinating competition in its own right. So yeah, I think that top eight, and it really speaks. The main thing, and I already touched on why I asked that question of you, but the main thing is not one Italian team is set in stone in the top eight in Europe, which is crazy for me to think about. Not even the team leading Serie A. There's no teams. There's only one left in Europe, which is Atalanta, and they don't look like they're going to finish top four in Serie A. So they're unconvincing, is the way to put it. Even though I think AC have some good players, I think I've liked what I've seen from Napoli in spurts. I like what I see from Inter a lot of the time because they're organised and they know how to play. I think Simeone Inzaghi isn't a very good coach in terms of coaching the attack, coaching the possession play, how to break teams down, but he is a very good coach in terms of getting the shape right and the organisation right, much in the Conte mould. And which I always think is the right way to prioritize things. You've got to be competitive in games before you can go on and dominate games. You got to crawl before you learn how to walk, I guess, or walk before you run. But I couldn't convincingly say that any of those Italian teams would be in the top eight. So I think you have to go back to default and say it's Atletico. Really disappointed in Dortmund, as I've already said, that they can't even get into the top eight, especially with a striker like Haaland. I know he's been injured, and that's probably a big part of why they've been inconsistent. But I don't see enough from the manager. I didn't see enough from the manager before he came to Dortmund, and I definitely haven't seen enough from him while he's been at Dortmund. Leipzig is still in Europe, but thoroughly unconvinced, and they got decimated as well in the summer. So yeah, that eighth spot is definitely up for grabs. It'll be interesting to see in the run-in. We have about 10 games left in most of the leagues, around about that, all over Europe, to see if someone can firmly cement themselves into that sort of power ranking. But yeah, I just asked it because I wanted to see if you would put any Italian teams in, because I couldn't put any Italian teams in with any certainty. So I think it speaks to the strength of two leagues, really, Italy and Germany. And I thought Italy was due a sort of renaissance this season. And while the title race is interesting, it's not particularly high quality. And Germany, I used to have the Bundesliga as the second best league in the world, but I think that's fallen off. I think Spain's now actually La Liga is back in second, and I had La Liga way down there in recent years. I didn't enjoy watching it, but I think that's sort of had a resurgence this season, and I think it's probably been the second most enjoyable league to watch. Those top four in Spain have good quality, not quite Premier League top three quality in the Premier League, but good quality. So yeah, for me, it speaks to firstly Italian football, but also the Bundesliga quietly. The quality in the Bundesliga has dropped off for me as well this season.
Yeah, so look, I think with everything you had to say, like, I think you're actually spot on. Like, the Italian league, it's not, it's definitely fallen off over the last couple of years, in my opinion. The German league, ever since, I guess, Dortmund has been, it's been up there, but it hasn't been at its most competitive best since Klopp left, and Bayern's just been Bayern pretty much. So other than them, the league overall, like, I'm not sure who else you can pick besides Bayern. If you're gonna say, oh, put them all in the same league, or like put Bayern in the Premier League, Bayern would compete for the Premier League, I think. But other than that, like, what other teams would really compete for the Premier League out of what's left? And I don't think any would really compete. In Spain, Real Madrid would compete, I think, but I think that'd sort of be like a Chelsea, like they'd be that sort of third team that's maybe pushing for second. And Barca would be probably like at the moment what they're currently doing at the moment. I think they'd be pushing for a Champions League spot. They wouldn't necessarily be competing for the league. So, and then you have Sevilla that's been good for the last couple of seasons, and like this season they're definitely doing really well. And Atletico has been always there as like a title contender or just finishing third, and always pushing Barca and Real Madrid to their limits. So yeah, Spain, it's they're back to being, I guess, the second best league in the world overall.
Yeah, I agree with that. No, it's interesting to do it that way, and sort of if you were to put all of these teams in a league and the teams contending for eighth place, where would they be? Can you compare and contrast? That's a really interesting way, and I think you're spot on in saying that Real Madrid would probably be that fourth place or fifth place team, I guess, if you had Bayern in that league as well, because I think Bayern would be with the top three, with Liverpool and City and maybe Chelsea, all four of them challenging for the league. Maybe Chelsea and Real just slip off a little bit like Chelsea have in the Premier League. And then I think you could compare Barcelona to the Arsenal project in terms of picking up a lot of steam later in the season, challenging for top four. Same with Atletico, all the Italian teams, Atletico and Sevilla. And I think Dortmund would probably be a little bit behind all of them as well. So that's an interesting way to do it, and I think we're both in agreement of what at least the top seven are, and then you'd have to look at really in depth to see who that eighth place, and maybe we'll discover that in the coming weeks as the season draws to a close.
Yeah, definitely. And look, I think this is the perfect way to wrap up the show as well. Like considering that there's Champions League tonight and tomorrow, and we'll be able to see, I guess, what six of those top clubs, top eight clubs that we mentioned, competing for the semi-finals of the Champions League. So we'll wrap it up there and see you after the Champions League is done this week.
Yeah, awesome. Can't wait to talk about the ties and be back on talking football very soon.
Yeah, awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure, and yeah, we'll be back with another episode after the ties are all done.
Yeah. See you guys.